The Alpine Vista FBO lounge at Teterboro Airport epitomized understated luxury. Italian leather couches, automated espresso machines, and staff who practically levitated rather than walked, all designed to ensure that the ultra-rich barely noticed the mechanics of their privileged travel. It was the kind of place where discretion was currency and belonging was assumed, for some. Sophia Langston belonged, or at least her net worth, her company's market cap, and the $15 million she'd spent on her Gulfstream G650 suggested she did. But Todd Benson, senior captain for Elite Aviation Services, clearly hadn't received that memo. "Excuse me, ma'am, but you can't be in here." Todd's voice cut through the hushed atmosphere, carrying that peculiar tone unique to white men addressing black women they've decided are out of place. Not quite hostile, but firm. The verbal equivalent of security approaching someone who's triggered a silent alarm. Sophia looked up from her laptop where she'd been reviewing acquisition proposals for her tech firm's European expansion. At 42, she'd mastered the art of the measured response, having navigated boardrooms where she was often the only black face and certainly the only black woman. Her tailored Armani suit and subtle Tiffany jewelry announced affluence to those fluent in wealth's visual language, but apparently Todd was reviewing a different lexicon. "I'm sorry?" she replied, her voice neutral despite the familiar heat rising in her chest, the body's instinctive response to yet another presumption of non-belonging. "This lounge is for private aircraft owners and their invited guests only," Todd explained, speaking with exaggerated patience, as if addressing a child or someone with limited English proficiency. "The commercial terminal is about 2 miles east." Around them, several white passengers glanced up briefly before returning to their devices, their disinterest confirming this wasn't their problem. A blonde woman in her 60s wearing tennis whites and diamonds whispered something to her husband, who chuckled softly. "I'm well aware of what this lounge is for," Sophia replied evenly. "I'm waiting for my flight to Geneva." Todd's expression shifted from professional firmness to barely concealed skepticism. "Your flight? And which flight would that be, exactly?" The question hung in the air, its subtext unmistakable. Sophia had encountered this particular strain of disbelief many times, the automatic assumption that black ownership of luxury assets was improbable at best, suspicious at worst. Tail number N628SL, the Gulfstream G650 scheduled for departure at 11:30. Todd's eyebrows rose fractionally. "You're claiming to be on Mr. Langston's aircraft?" "I am Ms. Langston," Sophia corrected, maintaining eye contact. "Sophia Langston. The aircraft is registered to my company, Langston Technologies." Todd's mouth tightened, the slight narrowing of his eyes betraying his continued doubt. "I see. And Mr. Langston would be—" "Non-existent," Sophia replied coolly. "There is no Mr. Langston in this context. The jet is mine. I own it. I'll be flying to Geneva for meetings with the World Economic Forum Technology Council." Todd gave a small, patronizing smile, the kind that doesn't reach the eyes. "Look, miss, I've been flying high-net-worth individuals for 20 years. I know all our regular clients, and the G650 owner demographic is, well, let's just say it has a certain profile." "A certain profile," Sophia repeated, her tone flat. "And what profile would that be, Captain?" "Benson. Todd Benson." He straightened slightly, his captain's stripes catching the light. "And I simply mean that G650 owners tend to be established business figures. Old money. Not ... He gestured vaguely toward her, apparently unable to find a way to say "not black women" that wouldn't explicitly reveal his bias. Sophia closed her laptop with deliberate calm and stood, bringing herself to eye level with Todd. At 5 feet 10 inches in heels, she matched his height exactly. "Captain Benson, I'd like you to call Coleman Williams, the account manager who handles my aircraft. He'll confirm that I am indeed Sophia Langston, founder and CEO of Langston Technologies, and the registered owner of the Gulfstream G650 with tail number N628SL. Once you've done that, I expect a professional apology, after which we can proceed with our scheduled departure to Geneva." Todd's jaw tightened, but something in Sophia's unwavering gaze, perhaps the absolute certainty of someone who'd built a billion-dollar company from nothing, made him hesitate. "I'll make that call," he conceded, though his tone suggested he was humoring her rather than acknowledging his error. "Please wait here." "I'm not going anywhere," Sophia replied. "This is, after all, where I belong." As Todd retreated to the staff area, Sophia remained standing, aware of the surreptitious glances from other passengers. She'd learned early that sitting back down after such confrontations was often misinterpreted as backing down, and Sophia Langston hadn't built Langston Technologies by backing down. Through the glass partitions separating the lounge from the staff area, she could see Todd gesticulating as he spoke on the phone, his body language evolving from certainty to confusion, to something resembling alarm. When he finally returned, his expression had shifted to a carefully neutral mask, the face of someone who has realized they've made a serious miscalculation, but isn't quite ready to admit it. "Ms. Langston," he began, his tone noticeably more formal, "there appears to have been some confusion. Coleman confirms that you are indeed the owner of the G650. We'll be ready for departure at 11:30 as scheduled." The pause before owner spoke volumes. A lingering doubt, a mental asterisk next to her claim to ownership that wouldn't have existed for a white man of the same age and attire. "Not confusion, Captain Benson," Sophia corrected calmly. "Prejudice. You assumed that I couldn't possibly own a $15 million aircraft because of how I look. That's not confusion. That's bias." Todd's face flushed. "With all due respect, Ms. Langston, I was simply following protocol. We have security procedures, which apparently include questioning black passengers but not white ones," Sophia observed, nodding toward an elderly white couple who had entered the lounge during their conversation and been greeted with immediate deference by the staff. "I've been coming to this FBO for 3 years. I've never been questioned before today." "That's hardly fair," Todd protested, lowering his voice as other passengers began to take more obvious interest in their conversation. "Race has nothing to do with it. You weren't in our system as the primary passenger." "I'm literally listed as the owner on the aircraft registration," Sophia pointed out, "and the flight plan shows me as passenger 1. So again, the question becomes, why did you automatically assume I didn't belong here?" Before Todd could formulate a response, a tall black man in an elite aviation services executive uniform approached quickly from the terminal entrance, his expression a careful balance of concern and damage control. "Ms. Langston, I'm Marcus Jenkins, Operations Director. I've just been made aware of this situation. Please accept my sincere apologies for any misunderstanding." Todd straightened, clearly relieved by the arrival of someone who could extricate him from this increasingly uncomfortable confrontation. "Marcus, I was just explaining to Ms. Langston that she wasn't in the system as—" "She's in the system," Marcus cut him off, his voice professionally pleasant but with an undercurrent of steel. "She's been in the system for 3 years as the registered owner of N628SL. I personally handled her account transition when she upgraded from the G550. The subtle emphasis on owner wasn't lost on anyone within earshot. Todd's expression cycled rapidly through surprise, disbelief, and the dawning realization that he had severely miscalculated. "There must have been a glitch in the manifest system," he suggested weakly. "The only glitch here, Captain Benson," Marcus replied evenly, "was in your assessment of the situation. Ms. Langston is not only the owner of her aircraft but also one of our most valued clients. Her company's recent expansion into Europe has made Geneva a regular destination." The information was delivered with professional courtesy, but its subtext was clear. Sophia Langston wasn't an anomaly to be questioned, but a significant client whose business mattered to elite aviation services. Todd shifted uncomfortably, his gaze now fixed slightly above Sophia's head, rather than meeting her eyes directly. I apologize for the confusion, Ms. Langston. We'll be ready for departure as scheduled. That's not going to work for me, Captain Benson, Sophia stated calmly. I don't believe you're the right pilot for my aircraft today. Todd's head snapped up, genuine shock replacing discomfort. Excuse me? You've demonstrated a significant bias that makes me question your judgment, Sophia explained, her tone matter-of-fact rather than accusatory. If you automatically assume a black woman doesn't belong in this lounge, what other assumptions might you make during our flight? I'm not comfortable putting my safety in the hands of someone who has shown such poor assessment skills. Marcus cleared his throat softly. Ms. Langston, I assure you that Captain Benson is a highly qualified pilot with an excellent safety record. I don't doubt his technical qualifications, Sophia clarified. I'm questioning his judgment and his ability to interact professionally with passengers who don't fit his preconceived notions of who belongs where. By now, the entire lounge had abandoned any pretense of disinterest. The blonde woman who had whispered to her husband earlier was watching with undisguised fascination, while two businessmen near the window had paused their conversation to observe the unfolding drama. This is ridiculous, Todd protested, his professional veneer cracking under the prospect of being removed from a lucrative international flight. You're making this about race when it's simply about procedure. If it were about procedure, Sophia countered, you would have checked the manifest before approaching me. You would have verified my identity rather than immediately assuming I didn't belong. But you didn't because your procedure was informed by prejudice, not protocol. Marcus, clearly recognizing the potential for this situation to escalate further, made a swift decision. Captain Benson, please report to my office immediately. Captain Rivera will take the Geneva flight today. Todd's face flushed deeper, a vein visibly pulsing at his temple. This is outrageous. 20 years of service, and I'm being sidelined because someone played the race card? The phrase, that familiar dismissal of legitimate concerns about discrimination, hung in the air like a toxin. Around the lounge, several passengers winced at the naked hostility in Todd's voice, the mask of professionalism now completely abandoned. Captain, Marcus said quietly, his formal tone carrying an unmistakable warning, my office. Now. As Todd stormed off, posture rigid with indignation, Marcus turned back to Sophia. Ms. Langston, I cannot apologize enough for this incident. Captain Rivera is preparing your aircraft now, and will have you on your way to Geneva on schedule. Additionally, I'd like to offer complimentary flight services for your next 3 trips, as a gesture of our regret for this experience. Sophia studied him thoughtfully. I appreciate the gesture, Marcus, but what I'd actually prefer is to know what concrete steps Elite Aviation will take to ensure this doesn't happen to another black passenger. Marcus nodded, understanding immediately that this wasn't a negotiation for perks, but a demand for systemic change. I'll be initiating a comprehensive review of our training protocols, particularly around implicit bias. Captain Benson will face disciplinary action, and I'll be personally reviewing passenger interaction reports across all our FBOs to identify any patterns that might indicate similar issues with other staff. Good, Sophia acknowledged. I'd also suggest bringing in external consultants who specialize in aviation hospitality and diversity training. This isn't a problem unique to Elite Aviation, it's industry-wide. But that doesn't mean you can't be leaders in addressing it. I'll present that recommendation to our CEO this afternoon, Marcus promised. Would you be willing to share your experience directly with our leadership team? First-hand accounts are powerful motivators for institutional change. Schedule it for after my return from Geneva, Sophia agreed. And, Marcus, make sure they understand that I'm not an angry black woman looking for compensation. I'm a concerned client who expects excellence, not just in flight operations but in the entire customer experience. Marcus smiled slightly, the first genuine expression since his arrival. Having known you professionally for 3 years, Ms. Langston, I don't think anyone would make the mistake of underestimating your business acumen or mistaking your justified concerns for emotional reaction. You'd be surprised, Sophia replied, with a knowing glance toward the door through which Todd had exited. People see what they expect to see, until they're forced to see differently. 30 minutes later, as Sophia settled into the plush leather seat of her Gulfstream, Captain Elena Rivera completed the pre-flight checks with brisk efficiency. Unlike Todd, Rivera had greeted Sophia with immediate recognition and respect, the normal courtesy extended to any aircraft owner regardless of demographic profile. "Ms. Langston, we're cleared for departure to Geneva," Rivera informed her. "Weather looks good all the way across the Atlantic, with just some light turbulence expected near the Swiss Alps. We should have you on the ground by 1:15 local time." "Thank you, Captain," Sophia replied, already reopening her laptop to return to the acquisition proposal she'd been reviewing before Todd's interruption. As the aircraft taxied toward the runway, Sophia glanced out the window at the Teterboro terminal receding in the distance. The incident with Todd Benson was already being mentally filed alongside the countless other moments of casual racism she'd encountered throughout her career. The venture capitalists who'd addressed their questions to her male subordinates during funding pitches, the luxury car salesman who'd suggested she might prefer something more affordable, the real estate agent who'd tried to steer her away from certain neighborhoods. What made today's confrontation different wasn't the bias itself. That was depressingly familiar, but the immediate accountability that had followed. In her earlier career, before her company's IPO had made headlines and her name had become recognizable in business circles, such incidents had often gone unaddressed, with Sophia left to swallow the indignity and move forward. Now, her position afforded her the luxury of demanding consequences, not just for her own satisfaction, but to create a ripple effect that might benefit others who shared her skin color, but not her resources or influence. As the Gulfstream accelerated down the runway and lifted into the clear blue sky, Sophia typed a quick email to her executive assistant. "Jane, please schedule a meeting with our legal team next week to discuss establishing a foundation focused on addressing discrimination in luxury services and high-end travel." The incidents we've discussed previously, combined with today's experience at Teterboro, suggest this is an area where targeted advocacy could create meaningful change. Also, please send a formal letter to Stephen Brooks, CEO of Elite Aviation Services, acknowledging Operations Director Marcus Jenkins' professional handling of today's situation, but expressing my concerns about the broader cultural issues it revealed. "Thanks, Sophia." Setting her phone to airplane mode, Sophia returned to her acquisition documents, the familiar rhythm of business analysis providing a welcome return to normalcy. By the time her flight landed in Geneva, the incident with Todd Benson would be a fading irritation, one more data point in a lifetime of navigating spaces where her presence was questioned simply because of her skin color. Sometimes, justice arrived in unexpected packages. Today, it had come in the form of a flight manifest with her name listed as owner, the irrefutable evidence that had transformed Todd's certainty into confusion and ultimately consequence. It wasn't enough. Not nearly enough to address the systemic issues that created thousands of Todd Bensons across every industry and social stratum. But it was something. A small correction in a world badly in need of recalibration. A reminder that while prejudice remained pervasive, it didn't always win.